This is the Sentinel, broadcasting once again into the void. If you're hearing this, you're one of the few left. Maybe you're huddled in a basement, maybe a makeshift bunker, or maybe you're just sitting under the open sky, staring at the ruins of what we once called home. Wherever you are, you've survived another day, and in times like these, that's no small accomplishment. I'll admit, some nights I wonder if anyone's still out there, if these words are falling on empty airwaves, or if they're reaching someone, anyone, clinging to the scraps of what used to be. It's hard not to think about how quickly it all unraveled. One moment, the world was as we knew it, imperfect but whole, and the next, it was engulfed in flames, ash, and silence. It's been more than a year since the first sirens wailed. They started in the distance, barely audible, but soon they were everywhere. Warning systems lit up the skies, and the chaos began. I remember how it felt to see the horizon burn, cities reduced to nothing more than silhouettes against an inferno. For days, there was confusion. Every channel, every screen was flooded with conflicting reports. Missiles, counterstrikes, a war no one understood, but we all knew the outcome the moment it began. They called it Day Zero, the first day of the end. I think of it now as the day the world stopped making sense. The day connections were severed, and people became whispers in the dark. Entire cities vanished in an instant, leaving behind only craters and echoes. Communication lines went silent, and with them, the comforting hum of the modern world disappeared. No news, no orders, no explanations, just silence. And then the waiting began. For some, it was waiting for help. For others, it was waiting for the end. I've heard stories of how people spent those first nights. Families huddled together, neighbors lighting candles, strangers offering shelter. For a brief moment, it was almost beautiful, the way humanity reached for each other in the darkness. But the peace didn't last. It never does. Now what's left? Scattered remnants of what we once were. Burned out buildings, roads overtaken by weeds, and a sky that's often too choked with ash to let the stars through. Some days, it feels like the earth itself is grieving, mourning what we've done to it and to each other. I can't say I blame it, but still, you're here. You're listening, and maybe that's enough for tonight. In a world that feels like it's collapsing in on itself, the simple act of staying alive feels like defiance. So keep listening, whoever you are, wherever you are. The world might be unrecognizable now, but as long as there are ears to hear and voices to speak, maybe, just maybe, it's not entirely gone. Day Zero, that's what they called it. But it wasn't just a day, it was the moment everything changed. I still replay it in my head sometimes, not because I want to, but because I can't seem to stop. The images come uninvited, sharp as broken glass, cutting through whatever I'm doing. The sky. It's always the sky that I remember first. It wasn't blue anymore. It wasn't even gray. It was fire. Bright, unrelenting fire that swallowed the horizon and painted the clouds with ash. The first strikes came so quickly. Most people didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late. The air raid sirens blared in some places, but in others, there wasn't even time for that. Just a flash, then chaos. I remember seeing the streams of people on the highways, cars packed so tight they didn't move for hours. Some abandoned their vehicles and walked, carrying whatever they could on their backs. Others stayed, clinging to the hope that traffic would break, that they'd somehow get out. It didn't matter. The fire found them all the same. The news channels were frantic at first, voices overlapping as they tried to make sense of it. There were maps, diagrams, experts pointing at places on a screen. Strategic targets, they called them. Like that made it better. But it wasn't just bases and infrastructure. Cities were wiped off the map as if they'd never existed. Entire populations gone in a heartbeat. And then the screens went dark. No more updates. No more live footage. Just static. Silence. I remember the silence most of all. It was eerie, unnatural, like the world had taken a deep breath and was holding it, waiting to see what came next. People whispered instead of shouting, as if raising their voices would somehow draw the chaos closer. The streets were empty except for the occasional figure darting between buildings, their arms full of supplies, their faces drawn with panic. I saw a man run out of a grocery store with a loaf of bread in one hand and a gallon of water in the other, as if that was all he'd need to survive the end of the world. For a while, there were rumors of safe zones. Go north, people said. The government's setting up shelters. Or, head west. They've got food and medical supplies. But no one really knew. Every road felt like a gamble. Some took the chance and never came back. Others stayed put, barricading their doors and windows, hoping they'd chosen the lesser of two evils. And then the waiting began. That was the worst part. Waiting for the next explosion, the next flash, the next terrible thing. People started counting the hours between attacks, as if that would tell them how much time they had left. Some counted days, then weeks, then months. I stopped counting altogether. It didn't seem to matter anymore. If you're hearing this, maybe you remember it too. Or maybe you were lucky enough to be far away when it all started. Either way, you're here now, and that means you've made it through more than most. That means you've faced the fire, the fear, the endless uncertainty, and you're still standing. For what it's worth, that's something. That's everything. Keep holding on. Keep listening. It's not over yet. It's hard to describe the world now to someone who hasn't seen it with their own eyes. The things we once took for granted, the familiar hum of traffic, the glow of city lights, even the smell of fresh air are gone. What's left feels alien, like we've stepped into someone else's nightmare, and yet it's ours. This is the world we've inherited, or maybe the one we deserve. Cities aren't cities anymore. They're skeletons. Towers that once stretched into the sky are now hollowed-out husks. Their windows shattered, their walls scorched. Streets are littered with debris, twisted metal, broken glass, fragments of lives left behind. The roads themselves have begun to crack and crumble, nature slowly reclaiming what we abandoned. Grass grows in the cracks of asphalt, and vines creep up the sides of buildings. It's almost beautiful in a haunting way. The air is different too. It's heavier now, dense with ash and smoke, as if the atmosphere itself is grieving. On some days, the sky turns a sickly orange, the sun barely visible behind a haze that never quite dissipates. Breathing it in feels wrong, like inhaling the remnants of everything that burned. I've heard stories of people coughing up black phlegm after spending too long outside. They call it the ash lung. It's another thing to fear, another thing to survive. But it's not just the air or the cities. It's the silence. That's what gets to you. There are no birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. Even the wind seems hesitant, as if it's afraid to disturb the stillness. At night, the quiet is suffocating, a heavy reminder of how empty the world has become. You can almost hear your own heartbeat, steady and defiant in the void. And then there are the people, or what's left of them. Most of us keep to ourselves now, wary of strangers. Trust is a luxury we can't afford. The few times I've encountered others, it's been tense, cautious. No one knows who might be desperate enough to steal, or worse. But there are still glimpses of humanity, moments that remind me we're not completely lost. I saw a man once, walking through the ruins of a neighborhood with a small child on his back. He carried her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Maybe she was. There are other stories too, darker ones. People who've turned to violence, or worse, to survive. There are rumors of groups that prey on the weak, taking what they want and leaving nothing but destruction behind. Some call them raiders, others simply monsters. I try not to dwell on it, but it's hard to ignore. The world isn't just broken. It's dangerous. Still, for all the destruction, for all the fear, there are moments of quiet resilience. A flower blooming in the rubble, a child's laugh echoing down an empty street, the faint sound of music drifting from a broken radio. These small, fragile things remind me that the world isn't completely gone. Not yet. As long as there are people like you still listening, still holding on, there's a chance we can find a way forward. Maybe not to rebuild what we had, but to create something new, something better. Stay with me. Stay alive. Keep listening. Before everything fell apart, life was ordinary. It was messy, frustrating, beautiful, and, most of all, predictable. We complained about traffic, stood in long lines for coffee, and wasted hours staring at our phones. We worried about deadlines, bills, and plans for the weekend. And now, I would give anything to experience even the worst of those days again. I don't think we realized how much we had, how much we relied on the fragile web that kept us all connected. We didn't see how quickly it could unravel. I think about those ordinary moments more than I should. Not just the big things, but the small ones. The sound of rain on a window, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery, the way sunlight filtered through the curtains on a lazy morning. Back then, they were just there. Now, they're ghosts, memories that haunt me more than the destruction ever could. I didn't appreciate them. Not really. None of us did. I remember this one time, years ago, when I was stuck in traffic on my way home from work. It was one of those days where nothing seemed to go right. My phone was buzzing with emails I didn't want to answer, and I was already running late for dinner. I sat there, staring at the brake lights in front of me, fuming at how unfair it all felt. And then, out of nowhere, this song came on the radio. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was one of those songs that grabs you by the chest and doesn't let go. For a few minutes, I forgot about everything else. I just sat there listening, caught up in the music. Funny, isn't it? That moment stuck with me out of all the others. Feels like a lifetime ago. Now, there are no traffic jams, no bustling streets. The roads are empty, cracked and overgrown with weeds. The lights don't glow at night anymore, and the silence stretches out like a vast, empty ocean. But I still think about that song, about how it made me feel. Back then, it was just a brief escape from the noise of the world. Now, it's a reminder of what we've lost, and what's worth holding on to. I wonder sometimes if we'll ever have those moments again, those little flashes of beauty in the middle of chaos. Maybe we will. Maybe one day, long after this is over, someone will sit in traffic and hear a song on the radio that makes them forget their troubles, just for a moment. Maybe they'll look out their window and see the world coming back to life. People laughing, streets alive with movement, the hum of the world returning. But for now, it's just us, the ones who are still here, still listening. Maybe that's enough, to remember what it was like, and to hope that someday, somehow, we'll find a way back to something better. So keep going, keep listening, and don't forget, there's still beauty in this broken world, even if you have to look a little harder to find it. I want to share something tonight. It's a story sent to me a while back, one I've been holding on to. Came through an old signal, weak and barely audible, but I managed to piece together most of it. It's from someone who's been through more than most of us could imagine, yet somehow they're still out there, still surviving. The message was from a woman named Elena. She said she's been living underground for months now, in what used to be a subway tunnel. She described it as a place where the light never reaches, where the walls are cold and damp, and the air is thick with the smell of mildew and decay. She told me she wasn't alone when she first got there. She was with her family, a husband, 2 kids, but over time the tunnel took its toll. They didn't make it. She didn't say how or why, and I didn't need her to. The pain in her words was enough. For a while she thought about giving up. She said the loneliness was the worst part. The way the silence wrapped around her, pressing in like the weight of the earth above her. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow a reminder of how vulnerable she was. But then, one day, something changed. She found a dog. Or maybe the dog found her, it doesn't really matter. She said it was small, scrappy, and covered in dirt, but its eyes were bright, full of life. She didn't know where it came from or how it survived down there, but it didn't seem to matter. It just appeared, wagging its tail like it had been waiting for her all along. She named it Lucky, said it felt ironic at first, but over time, it started to feel right. Lucky became her reason to keep going. She scavenged for both of them, shared what little she found, and in return, Lucky gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: companionship, a reason to wake up each day, a reminder that she wasn't completely alone. Elena's message ended with a simple note: "We're still here." That was it. No plea for help, no grand statement about survival. Just those 3 words. And honestly, that's what stuck with me the most. We're still here, in a world that's been ripped apart, where loss is a constant and hope feels like a luxury. Those words carry a weight that's hard to put into perspective. So, wherever you are tonight, I want you to remember Elena. Remember Lucky. Remember that even in the darkest places, even when it feels like the world has forgotten you, there's still a chance to find something worth holding on to. It might not be much. A stray dog, a flicker of light, a voice on the radio, but sometimes that's all it takes to keep going. We're still here. You're still here. And as long as we are, there's still a chance for something better. Keep listening. Keep holding on. You're not alone. Lately, I've been hearing whispers. Stories passed from one survivor to another, moving faster than you'd think possible in a world this broken. They're fragments, really half-truths, guesses, and sometimes outright fantasies. But they're persistent, like they're clinging to the air itself, refusing to be forgotten. Tonight, I want to share a few of them with you, not because I know they're true, but because they're part of the world we're living in now. And maybe, just maybe, there's something in them worth listening to. The first story is about a safe zone, far to the north. Some say it's an old military base, fortified and self-sustaining. Others claim it's something new, built from the ground up after the war started. The details vary. Some say it's run by a group of scientists. Others say it's a remnant of the government trying to rebuild. But the one thing everyone agrees on is that it's safe. No fawauchi, no hades, no danger. Just clean water, food, and shelter. A sanctuary. The catch? No one seems to know exactly where it is. The stories are always vague. North of the mountains or past the old highway. Directions that could lead anywhere or nowhere at all. I've met people who say they're heading that way, convinced it's real, that it's worth the risk. Some of them have a look in their eyes, like they've already decided they won't turn back, no matter what. I hope they find it. I really do. But I can't help but wonder how many have gone searching and never returned. Then there are the lights. I've heard about them from people traveling at night, describing strange glows on the horizon. Some say it's the remnants of the military, still operating in secret. Others believe it's something worse, machines, drones, programmed to patrol the wasteland and eliminate anything that moves. There's even a theory that the lights are something new entirely, some kind of weapon left behind by the war, still active, still searching for a target. Whatever they are, no one seems to agree. All I know is that they're out there, and no one who's gone looking for them has come back with answers. And then there are the voices. I haven't heard them myself, but others claim to have picked them up on old radios, faint and distorted. They say the voices speak in strange patterns, repeating numbers or phrases over and over again. Some think it's a code, a message meant for anyone who's still listening. Others think it's a trap, something designed to lure survivors into danger. Either way, it's unsettling to think about. A voice out there in the darkness, speaking to no one and everyone all at once. I don't know if any of these stories are true. Maybe they're just the product of desperate minds, trying to make sense of a world that no longer makes sense. Or maybe there's something to them, a thread of truth hidden in the noise. Either way, they remind me of one thing. The world isn't as empty as it seems. There's still movement, still mystery, still something out there beyond the ruins. And as long as that's true, there's still hope. So if you hear the whispers, the rumors, the stories, listen carefully, but be cautious. The world we live in now doesn't give second chances. Stay safe and stay listening. Even in a world as shattered as this one, there are moments that make you stop and take a breath. They catch you off guard, like they don't belong in the wreckage around them. Little glimpses of life pushing through the cracks, reminding us that the world isn't completely gone. Not yet. I was out scavenging a few days ago, moving through the outskirts of what used to be a neighborhood. Most of it was rubble. Houses collapsed in on themselves, windows shattered, the streets barely recognizable. I wasn't expecting to find much. I was just looking for anything useful. Canned food, batteries, maybe even a scrap of fabric that hadn't been ruined by time or fire. And then I saw it. A flower, bright and defiant, growing out of a crack in the pavement. It was small, just a splash of yellow against the gray, but it stopped me in my tracks. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen something like that. Something alive. It felt like the world was trying to tell me something, like it hadn't completely given up on us yet. I stood there for longer than I should have, just staring at it. I didn't want to touch it, didn't want to disturb it. It felt sacred in a way, like a fragile piece of hope that had somehow survived everything we'd done. I don't know if anyone else would have noticed it or cared, but for me, it was a reminder that there's still beauty out there, even if it's hard to find. It's not just flowers, either. There are other moments, other signs, like the time I heard music drifting through the ruins, a faint melody carried on the wind. I never found out where it was coming from or who was playing it, but it stayed with me. For a few minutes, it was like the world wasn't broken, like we hadn't lost everything. Just music, simple and pure, cutting through the silence. Or the time I saw a child's drawing taped to the inside of a shattered window. It was barely hanging on, the edges curled and faded, but I could still make it out. It was a picture of a family, stick figures with bright smiles, standing under a big sun. It made me wonder who had drawn it, where they were now, and if they were still out there somewhere, still holding on to the hope that their family could be whole again. These moments are rare, but they matter. They remind me why we keep going, why we fight to survive in a world that sometimes feels like it doesn't want us anymore. They're not big or loud or earth-shattering, but they're enough to make you pause, enough to remind you that life finds a way, even in the darkest places. So if you find something like that, something small, something beautiful, hold on to it. Let it remind you that there's still light in this world, no matter how faint it might seem. And if you can share it, let someone else see it too, because sometimes that's all it takes. A moment, a reminder, a little bit of beauty in the ruins. That's what keeps us human. That's what keeps us alive. I've intercepted a lot of strange signals since I started broadcasting. Some are clear and sharp, like echoes from a world that no longer exists. Others are distorted, garbled, fragments of something that might have been important once but is now just noise. And then there are the ones that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, the ones that don't feel like they should exist at all. A few nights ago, I picked up one of those signals. It started as a faint hum, barely audible, almost easy to ignore. But then it grew louder, sharper, like it was trying to force its way through the static. I adjusted the dials, trying to make sense of it, and for a moment, I thought I heard something. Words, maybe, or numbers. It was hard to tell. The sound was warped, like it had been dragged through time and space before reaching me. I listened for hours, hoping it would resolve into something I could understand. But it didn't. It stayed fractured, like a puzzle missing too many pieces to ever be whole. The closest thing I can compare it to is a heartbeat. Steady, rhythmic, but wrong somehow. Too mechanical, too cold. It wasn't comforting. It was unsettling, like it was watching me even as I listened. The signal faded eventually, slipping back into the static, but it hasn't left my mind. I've been wondering about it ever since. Was it a transmission from somewhere far away, someone like me trying to reach out? Or was it something else entirely? Something I'm better off not understanding? I don't know, and maybe I don't want to. It's not the first time I've heard something like that. Over the months, I've intercepted other strange broadcasts. Bits of music that don't belong, voices speaking languages I don't recognize, sounds that shouldn't exist. One time, I picked up what sounded like a child laughing, clear and bright, cutting through the static like a knife. It didn't make sense. There was no way it could have been real, but it still sent chills down my spine. I don't know where these signals come from, or why they reach me. Maybe they're just remnants of a world we destroyed, echoes bouncing endlessly through the airwaves. Or maybe there's something else, something watching, waiting, testing us. I try not to dwell on it too much. This world has enough dangers without adding invisible ones to the list. But I can't ignore them either. They're out there, just like we are, refusing to fade away. They remind me that the air is still alive with possibility, even if it's a little terrifying. So I'll keep listening, keep trying to make sense of the chaos. Maybe one day, one of those signals will carry a message we all need to hear. Or maybe it won't. Either way, the static is never truly empty. And as long as it isn't, there's still something left to fight for. Something left to hope for. Survival is a strange thing. It changes you in ways you don't realize until you're too far gone to turn back. The things you used to value, the comforts, the routines, the little luxuries, they start to feel like distant memories, fragments of a life that doesn't belong to you anymore. What takes their place is something raw, something primal. You stop thinking about tomorrow, next week, next year. All that matters is now, getting through this moment, this day, this night. But there's a cost. There always is. I think about that a lot when the silence stretches too long, when there's nothing to distract me from the thoughts creeping in. What does it mean to survive when everything else is gone? When the world you knew is nothing more than ashes and ruins? When the people you loved are just shadows in your mind? Is it enough to simply keep breathing, or is there more to it than that? I don't have the answers. I wish I did. All I know is that survival is a lonely road, even when you're not walking it alone. The people who manage to stick together, who find a way to hold on to each other despite everything, they're the lucky ones. Or maybe they're the strong ones. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. For most of us, though, it's isolation that defines this life. We've learned to keep our distance, to avoid the risk that comes with trusting strangers. It's easier that way, safer. But safer doesn't mean better. I've heard from people who've gone months without seeing another living soul, who've forgotten the sound of someone else's voice. They talk about how the silence feels like it's pressing in on them, growing heavier with each passing day. They talk about how, sometimes, they think they hear things, voices, footsteps, laughter, only to realize it's all in their head. I felt it too, the weight of being alone. Even here, with this radio, with you listening, it's hard not to feel it. I talk into the void and hope someone hears me, but the truth is, I'll probably never know if you're really out there. And that's the hardest part, holding on to the belief that I'm not just a voice in the dark, that I'm not the last one left. But maybe that's what survival is. Not just the act of staying alive, but the act of believing. Believing that there's still a reason to wake up each day, still a chance for something better, still a world worth fighting for. Believing that even in the silence, we're not truly alone. So if you're out there, if you're listening, know that you're not the only one. Even if we're scattered and broken, even if the world feels impossibly empty, we're still here. And as long as we're here, as long as there are voices cutting through the static, there's hope. Keep listening, keep believing. That's all we can do. That's what keeps us human. Something strange happened the other night. I was scanning frequencies like I always do, hoping to find something. A voice, a signal, even just a fragment of a song. Most of the time, it's just static, endless, and unchanging. But this time, there was something else. A voice, faint and distorted, buried under layers of interference. It was hard to make out at first, like it didn't want to be heard. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. It wasn't just noise. It was a message, deliberate and precise. The voice repeated the same phrase over and over. The arc awaits, coordinates to follow. That was it. No explanation, no context. Just those words, cycling endlessly before the signal cut out. I tried to track it, to pinpoint where it was coming from, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. All that was left was static. I've been thinking about it ever since. The arc awaits. It sounds like something out of a story, doesn't it? Like a promise or maybe a warning. An ark, a place of safety, a refuge in the storm. But the world we live in now doesn't make promises like that, and it doesn't hand out warnings lightly. So what was it? A beacon of hope? A trap? Something else entirely? I've heard of places called arks before. During the early days of the war, some governments talked about building underground shelters, massive complexes designed to sustain life for years. The idea was that a select few would ride out the destruction, emerging only when the world was ready to rebuild. But those were just rumors. I've never met anyone who's seen one, and most people dismissed them as wishful thinking or propaganda. Still, the idea sticks with me. What if it's real? What if there is a place out there, hidden and secure, waiting for survivors to find it? It's hard not to want to believe in something like that, especially when every day feels like a fight just to stay alive. But belief can be dangerous in a world like this. It can make you reckless, make you take risks you can't afford. I keep coming back to the phrase, though. The ark awaits. It feels deliberate, like it was meant for someone. Maybe for you, maybe for me. I don't know. But if it's true, if there really is something out there, it raises another question. Why send out the message now? What changed? What are they waiting for? Or worse, what are they running from? I'll keep listening, keep trying to catch the signal again. Maybe I'll hear more, maybe I won't. But if you're out there and you hear it too, think carefully. A promise of safety is tempting, but the road to find it might cost you more than you're willing to pay. Still, it's something, isn't it? A glimmer in the dark. Possibility. For now, all we can do is wait, listen, and wonder if the arc is real, and if it is, whether we'll ever find it. Stay safe wherever you are, and keep listening. Sometimes I wonder about who's out there, listening to this. Maybe you're in a bunker, surrounded by canned food and the hum of an old generator. Or maybe you're sitting by a fire, using the last of your batteries to hear this broadcast. Maybe you're moving, always moving, trying to stay ahead of the dangers that lurk out there. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you know this. You're not alone. It's easy to feel like you are. This world has a way of making you believe that you're the last one left, that no one else could possibly be enduring the same struggle. The silence presses in, thick and unyielding, and you start to wonder if it'll ever end. I felt it too, that crushing sense of isolation. It's why I started broadcasting in the first place. Not because I thought I could save anyone, but because I couldn't stand the thought of being the only voice left in the dark. When I speak to you, I imagine the faces of people I'll never meet. I imagine your hands, rough from work or trembling from fear, tuning in to this frequency. I imagine your eyes, scanning the ruins for some sign of life, some reason to keep going. I imagine your heart, heavy with loss but still beating, still defying everything that's tried to stop it. You're out there. I know you are, and that's enough for me to keep talking. I wonder what you're holding on to, what keeps you moving forward. Is it the memory of someone you loved, someone you lost? Is it the hope of finding a safe place, a future that's better than this? Or is it something simpler, something primal, the sheer, stubborn will to survive, to prove that you're stronger than whatever tried to break you? Whatever it is, hold on to it. Let it be your anchor, your guide. Let it remind you why you're still here. And remember this, even in the worst moments, even when the world feels like it's crumbling beneath your feet, you're part of something bigger. You're part of what's left, the fragile thread that ties us all together. Every breath you take, every step you manage, every time you find the strength to carry on, you're adding to the story of what comes next. You're proof that we're not finished yet. I can't promise that it'll get easier. I can't promise that the pain will fade, or that the world will suddenly make sense again. But I can promise this. As long as you're listening, I'll keep talking. I'll be here, night after night, speaking into the void and hoping you're on the other side. Because sometimes that's all we need. A voice to remind us that we're not alone. A voice to remind us that we're still here. So keep listening, keep surviving, and know that somewhere, someone is thinking of you, even if they'll never know your name. You matter, your story matters, and together, even in the silence, we'll find a way through this. As the night stretches on and the airwaves hum with static, I find myself wondering what the future will look like. Not the future we planned for, the one filled with bright lights and endless possibilities, but the one we've been thrust into. The one we'll have to create out of the ashes. What kind of world will we build, if we're lucky enough to get that chance? And who will we become in the process? I think about the stories I've shared with you, the moments of resilience, of kindness, of defiance. I think about the flower growing through the cracks, the music drifting through the ruins, the messages of hope from people who refuse to give up. Those are the things that give me hope, not the grand gestures or the promises of salvation, but the small, quiet acts of humanity that survive even in the darkest times. They're the seeds of something new, something better. But hope is fragile, isn't it? It's hard to hold on to when the world feels so heavy, when every step forward comes with the weight of everything we've lost. There are days when it feels easier to let go, to give in to the silence. But then I think about you, about the fact that you're still here, still listening, and it reminds me why I started this in the first place. If you can hold on, so can I. The truth is, I don't know what's waiting for us out there. Maybe the rumors are true. Maybe there is a safe zone, a place where the air is clean and the lights never go out. Or maybe it's just another story, a dream we tell ourselves to make the days a little more bearable. Either way, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we keep moving forward, even if we don't know where the road will take us. This isn't the end of the story. Can't be. As long as there are voices like yours and mine, as long as there are people willing to fight for something better, the story goes on. It might not look the way we imagined, and it won't be easy, but it's ours to write. We're the ones who get to decide what comes next, one small act of courage at a time. So tonight, as you sit wherever you are, I want you to think about the things that matter to you, the people you've loved, the dreams you've had, the moments that have kept you going. Hold on to them. Let them guide you. Let them remind you that even in a world like this, there's still something worth fighting for. And when the sun rises tomorrow and the ruins around us come into view again, remember this: you are not alone. We are not alone. Together, even in the face of everything we've lost, we can build something new, something worth living for. This is the Sentinel signing off for now, but I'll be here as long as this frequency holds. Keep listening, keep hoping, keep fighting. We're still here, and as long as we are, there's still a chance. Good night, wherever you are.